All right, looks like we have hit the top of the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about this month, as I'm sure everyone is expecting. So welcome today. I am Megan Shargorodsky with the Kentucky Climate Center, and I will be your presenter this week, and we will be talking about the Did I get muted?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll start over. So welcome, everybody. I'm Megan Shargorodsky with the Kentucky Climate Center, and I will be your host today. And we will be talking about the conditions that we have been seeing with drought, as well as the hydrologic conditions. And this is your monthly webinar for July 2022. As always, this is a webinar that is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center, but represents the partnerships among many different organizations. This is in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. We also have partners, Chip Zimmer from the Kentucky Department of Water, as well as Matt Dixon from the UK Ag Weather Center. Our next regularly scheduled webinar is the first Thursday of the month, as always, and that will be August 4th of 2022 at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. We do have the opportunity to increase the frequency as we are getting deeper and deeper into drought. So we may utilize this in July, depending on how things progress as we move forward. So keep an eye out on your email for that. On the top here, I have two images. These are both from Todd County, which has been incredibly hot lately. And so you can see on the left, that is from the end of May, and on the right is from the end of June. So there's been quite a bit of dryness that has encompassed that area. You can see that there are some crops growing. I can't remember what those are, but the crops are growing, but the grass is looking pretty dry. Just to give you a brief outline of what we will be talking about today, we will be covering the recent conditions. We will talk about some of the ag impacts and other impacts that we have seen across the state, as well as the outlooks as we move forward into the month ahead and the season ahead. And then wrapping up with a summary and then an opportunity for questions and discussion. On the left, I have two pictures again from Kentucky Mesonet webcams. The top one is from Clark County from a hay harvest, and the bottom one is from Nicholas County from June 8th, and that is a sunset with rain in the background. So I chose that picture in particular because June 8th was a date, both the 6th, 7th, and 8th were some of the last days that some areas had seen a significant rainfall. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So looking at the past 7 days of the radar estimated rainfall, as well as the observed rainfall, it is a little messy and hard to see the numbers that are on here, but if you can zoom in just a little bit, you'll be able to see what our Kentucky Mesonet stations have reported. There are some that have only had a few hundredths of an inch of rain within the past week. Obviously, this does not include the rainfall that is occurring today. So this is looking from yesterday, basically at midnight, back 1 week. And so this is part of the reason why we are seeing increased drought in the area. Not only are our stations not reporting very much, but we are seeing just overall reduced rainfall. Looking back, we normally don't do a 14-day image here. We usually just skip straight to 30, but I feel like the 14-day tells a lot as well. So again, in this past 2 weeks, there are several stations that have only had a few hundredths of an inch. And this is mostly in the Todd County and Logan County area, but there is also Hart County, as well as over in in Western Kentucky, there are some that have only had a few tenths of an inch. So we do have one station there that has 4.22 inches that happened to have a significant rainstorm that went over our station, but it was fairly limited within the county. Looking at the 30-day, again, you see the same pattern in Southern Kentucky as well as Western Kentucky, where the rainfall amounts are just so low. And Eastern Kentucky, thankfully, has had pretty replenishing rainfall. However, the issue there has been because of the isolated storms that they have seen, they have had increased flash flooding incidents because of that, because most of this rainfall is happening within just a couple of rain events as opposed to being spread out over multiple rain events. Going back to the 60 days, this is one of the maps where our color scheme for the background probably needs to be adjusted just a little bit, because usually if you see the orangey colors, you think drier. So in this case, this is on the upper end of the rainfall. So while most of the state is pretty green, we do have some areas that are seeing the below normal rainfall, and in just a minute we'll talk about that one. And so looking at the 90-day, Central Kentucky, the Owensboro area are all in this only 4 to 6 inches, or I guess 6 to 8 inches for the past 90 days. And so that is part of the reason why that area is in a moderate drought at the moment. So looking at the actual comparison to normal with the 30, 60, and 90-day periods, you can see these same areas that have been emphasized in the past few slides, that they are dry. It is very unfortunate for Western Kentucky over in Graves and Callaway County down into Tennessee, as well as the Barron, Warren, Allen, and Monroe County areas. They are about 4 inches below normal for the 30-day period. Moving to the 60 and 90-day, it does smooth out a little bit because we did have a pretty decent rainfall event that happened on June 7th. Again, June 7th was one of those last days that some of these areas had rainfall. So keeping that in mind, as we move farther back, it does get a little bit closer to normal. However, across most of the state, it is pretty widespread, 2 to 4 inches or even 4 to 6 inches below normal. Looking at the temperature departures, we've had a really, really hot June, and this is pretty well displayed whenever you're looking at the departure from the normals. So on the top left is the average temperature, and a good portion of the state is at or right above normal, but we do have some areas that, especially in the areas that did not have as much rain, that they are 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 degrees warmer than normal. Looking at the maximum temperatures, again, that same area in South Central Kentucky, it is highlighted as one of those areas that not only didn't have very much rain, but it also is pretty warm. Minimum temperatures are basically right above or right below normal, depending on where you are in the state. However, we have had numerous records that have been broken for the high low temperature on numerous days across the past month. Looking at the Kentucky Mesonet, this is only for June, so June 1st through June 30th. And we have several areas that had upper 90s that were the actual temperatures that were recorded. I believe the highest on this map is 98.07 in Hopkins County. But moving to the next one is the highest temperatures for the past month. And so this actually includes the past few days where we have had the excessive heat index, or excessive heat warnings, and the high heat indexes. So you can see here that we have 2 stations that have broken 100, and that is Todd County as well as Ohio County. And I want you to keep that in mind because that is what has highlighted here with these high heat indexes. So we are not only seeing these really high temperatures, but we're also seeing really moist air mass these past few days. And so that combined with the high temperatures led to 121 heat index in Ohio County. And this happened repeatedly throughout the day, both between Ohio County and in Todd County in Southern Kentucky. They were both hovering around 120 heat index for the entire day. It was really hot out across the state, whether it was 120 or 110 heat index. It was really hot and really humid. And so I'll take this chance to reiterate that if you are outside whenever it is this hot out, please be mindful of your status and your people around you status. Make sure you're drinking, make sure you're staying cool as much as possible, and overall limit your time outside because it can happen very quickly. Just yesterday, I noticed several people around me just they started passing out because of the heat, and that was incredibly unexpected. So limit your time outside, and hopefully you'll be able to avoid that. I also want to take the opportunity to reemphasize the drought impact reporter. We always mention it at the very end of the webinar, but this time I feel like it tells a little bit more of the story to actually show what this goes into. And so this is the ArcGIS dashboard that the drought impact reporter information feeds into. And this is really, really crucial for whenever we are trying to figure out, and Chip is trying to summarize all of the conditions of what's going on in Kentucky. We can look at observations, and we can look at models, and we can look at radar estimates and all of that. But to actually have the data on the ground, sometimes that really makes the biggest difference. And so this means you're reporting what kind of impacts you're seeing in the area, you're sending in pictures, and it really, really helps. So all of you on this call, please make sure to jot down this URL that is listed. I will try to make sure to send that out again so that you have it in your email box, just because it really, in these coming weeks, it really will be of huge help as we move forward. Chip, do you want to say anything else about the impact reporter?
I think you about covered it. Just
okay.
Again, what you said, it really helps a lot. And it really helps a lot if the pictures are included as well. And just it gives us, say, a visual of what really is happening right there. And if you take if you do multiple reports over a series of time and take pictures of the same spot, it really helps seeing the degradation or the improvement if we're getting rain of what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, is that this should not only be whenever we're experiencing drought, this should also be whenever we're not experiencing drought. So we have that picture of what is normal for the area too. So we would greatly appreciate it. So talking about drought and the drought monitor, let's actually move to the status of the drought monitor this week. So this was released this morning, and if you can look in our area, you can see that this is not just Kentucky where this is starting to get worse. It is in Indiana, it is in Tennessee, it is in Missouri. So this is partially due to how some of the rainfall has set up, as well as the heat dome that set up over the southern US over the past couple of weeks. So thankfully we do not look like what the western half of the United States looks like, but let's hope that we do not get there. Looking a little closer at Kentucky itself, this is the conditions for this week. We had about a 25% increase in the moderate drought area this week, and that was an expansion basically toward the middle, or I guess between where that yellow line is, where that strip in the middle kind of came together, that is where the expansion happened mostly, and then some into the east. So it is pretty heavy drought across the entire state. The west or very far eastern Kentucky and northern Kentucky has been very fortunate again that they have gotten much more rain. However, there is still abnormally dry conditions in some of those areas that have missed out on some of the rain. So definitely we will be looking at the drought impact reporter. We will be looking at any other reports that have been sent in. Unfortunately, we are also in somewhat of a negative feedback cycle with the way that the drought is setting up in Kentucky. So whenever we have really dry conditions, it can affect how the storms progress through the state. We saw that with two of the large systems that moved through in June. They basically dissipated as soon as they hit central Kentucky. So hopefully today we'll be able to get some very widespread relief. However, that doesn't necessarily completely erase drought. Here is the drought monitor class change. So you can see again, there's that narrow strip in central Kentucky and in western Kentucky that did increase drought classes. And that was where the moderate drought expanded. But I did also want to show the 4-week change. This is pretty significant because this is pretty much a 1-month drought increase. So back looking at the beginning of June, whenever we had the June webinar, there were maybe a couple spots of abnormally dry conditions, but we were not in a widespread drought. This is all increased over this past month. This is also reflected whenever we look at the soil moisture and groundwater. So looking in at the state of Kentucky and looking at the colors, you can see that we are significantly drier. We do have quite a bit of dryness across the entire state. There is a little bit of improvement in eastern Kentucky in certain areas, but overall we are very dry across the board. These are the actual in the ground soil moisture measurements that we are seeing in Kentucky with the Kentucky Mesonet. So the left two are in western Kentucky. The top left is in Graves, the bottom left is in Todd. You can see that those, the blue, the green, and the lighter blue-gray color are all very, very low. It is even getting to the point where we are seeing changes in the 20 and 40-inch soil moisture. So keeping that in mind, looking at the right side, these are for Clinton County and Breathitt County. Again, these are areas that have seen much more rainfall. Those are the spikes that you see. So they are getting replenishment. However, the temperatures have been so high across the state that even though we are getting that replenishment there, these are the top shallow layer of the soil moisture sensors are seeing quite a bit of drying out. One thing that I wanted to mention too, and I'm not trying not to steal Matt's thunder for when he talks about ag impacts, but I wanted to show what we have with the Kentucky Mesonet. So we have these webcams, and I saw Greg Drake on a little bit ago. I'm not sure. Yeah, he's still on. So this is for Butler County, and this is looking from our station out over one of the very large cornfields. Well, this is what it actually looks like on the ground, and it might look much better whenever you're looking at it like this. Wow, this is a bunch of nice green corn. Well, this is what it actually looks like when you're looking closer. This is from about a week and a half ago, and this was very notable dryness. And taking that and going a little bit further, we actually have NDVI imagery that we're able to pull from our webcams. And this is able to give you basically a vegetative health or condition index. And so on the left is the true color, which again looks nice and green. However, on the right is really red. It should not be red. It should be more of a pink color. So whenever you're seeing the red like this is an indication that there's a lot of vegetative stress going on. So the visual image the true color image does not always really give you what is actually going on. So again, keeping in mind that whenever you're taking pictures, and if you are sending your images into the drought impact reporter, try to have them close-up photos so that we can get a little bit better of a picture of what's going on at the ground. Moving to the evaporative drought demand index, this is looking at basically how thirsty the air is. And so we're in a very moist air mass at the moment. So this was last updated a couple of weeks ago, or at the beginning of last week. So this is not entirely accurate for what it is right now. However, we were in a very hot and dry period at this point. So you can see that reflected as you look at this at both the 1 month and 2 month. I think that probably at this point, when it updates again, it will be a little bit more orangey as opposed to red, but I guess we'll find that out during the next webinar. Looking at the stream flow, this is pretty much a one-to-one reflection of where it's been really dry and where it hasn't got rain. We do have the areas in eastern Kentucky that have had regular rainfall. However, there are still some areas in northern Kentucky and through the western Kentucky Parkway area and Bluegrass Parkway that are seeing much below normal stream flow. And this is pretty much the same for the 28-day, except it does expand a little bit more into southeastern Kentucky as we move farther back. As you can imagine, there are no flooding stages right now. Some areas, again, in eastern Kentucky have had flash flooding, but it is not currently at an official flood stage. Looking at the storm reports, we've had several rounds of severe storms throughout the month of June. We had the 6-8, which was about between June 6th through June 8th. We had a couple of rounds of storms those couple of days, but then we also had numerous other ones from June 13th and 14th, June 17th, June 22nd, and then July 6th yesterday. So looking at the Kentucky Mesonet again, with the June 17th storm, we had pretty significant winds. And so we had several stations that reported wind gusts above 50, but we also had others in between that that had pretty significant impacts in the area. And so with that, I am actually going to pass it over to Matt Dixon from the UK Ag Weather Center.
All right, guys, happy toasty Thursday across the state of Kentucky. Megan, I want to inform you, we have some breaking news. Yesterday you showed, was it Hart County had a heat index of 121. Just south of there in Todd County, they just hit a heat index of 121. So currently their temperature is 100.7 degrees with a dew point of 79 degrees, brings that heat index up to 121. I know we have several people on here out in Western Kentucky. It's not much better surrounding that area. I see down there in Fulton County, I had 107 degrees. This is what it feels like outside when we take into account that dew point. Graves County, the Mayfield area at 110. What is that? Ballard County, I believe, at 111. So very toasty outside. For everyone else, before we got on this webinar, me, Megan, and Chip were having a conversation. A lot of us want to compare this drought to 2012. But there is one big difference. This year, we're seeing quite the dew point values out there. We have dew points getting well into the 70s. The past several days, we've had some stations hit 80 degrees. Just keep in mind, once we get into the 70s, that's when it gets very oppressive to be outside. Back in 2012, we actually had lower dew points. Yes, we had temperatures getting into the triple digits, hundreds, more times than not across Western Kentucky. But at that time, we had a pretty dry air mass in place. We had dew points in the 50s and 60s. So that was one of those dry heats. Dry heat, not necessarily better. It actually increases evapotranspiration, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the humidity this year, very oppressive. So getting into ag impacts, ag has most definitely taken a hit with these drought conditions expanding across the area. We're in a very sensitive time of development for the corn crop in terms of water stress. The heat and drought will hurt pollination and lead to decreased yield potential at this time in development. So talking with the UK corn specialist, Chad Lee, corn uses about 1/3 of an inch of water per day during tassel and silking. This can add up very quickly with this kind of heat in place when we look in terms of evapotranspiration. So looking at the table from the latest crop progress and condition report, 30% of the state's crop is now in that silking stage. So water is very important. Rainfall is very important at this point, and we're just not getting it for a large section of the state. Looking at that picture in the bottom right, this was taken from the A&R agent in Simpson County, Jason Phillips. I'm seeing more and more of these pictures as of late with corn plants really looking more like pineapples as leaves of the plant roll. So this rolling, it's if you're not familiar with the corn crop, it's a good representation of water stress as the plant is essentially trying to reduce transpiration or moisture loss by rolling those leaves, trapping that moisture. So most of these pictures are coming from Western and Central Kentucky, where rain has been very hit and miss. Megan was showing there was a thin stripe throughout Central and Western Kentucky that did see some higher totals recently, but once again, a large area of that portion of the state has missed out. So we need a soaking rain soon. I was looking at that batch of rainfall coming through Southern Illinois, Southeast or Southwestern Indiana, but with that negative feedback loop in place, it looks like the models are showing it's going to diminish as it gets into Kentucky. So we need some soaking rain. Something else that Chad brought up to me is that this is probably the worst year to have a drought just because of the high input cost in place this year with the war over in Russia, Ukraine, and farmers have more money into this year's crop than just a typical year. So don't want to see drought. Hopefully we get that widespread soaking rainfall sooner rather than later. Outside of corn, hearing some early planted beans are doing all right, while some double crop are struggling with a little topsoil moisture in place. Pastures have definitely taken a hit. I'm hearing many producers are already starting to feed hay. That's even whenever you're rotating cattle between pastures. So those pastures are really starting to get torched. In the end, many pastures, I've heard from producers, it's just slim pickings at this point. Maybe in some good news, I'm not hearing too many concerns from a hydrologic standpoint, farm ponds, stream flows. I know stream flows are getting low, but not impacting agricultural operations that much at this point. At least that's what I'm hearing. So maybe some good news in that aspect. But taking a closer look at the table above, corn silking once again at 30%. Soybeans are pretty much all on the ground at this point. Blooming at 20%. Winter wheat harvest is about done at 90%. looking over at crop conditions, this is something new. Seems like the past 3, 4, 5 years, our crop condition across the board has typically been in the good to excellent category. Yes, take out September 2019, we had that flash drought in place. Take out the fall of 2016 when we were dealing with wildfires across eastern Kentucky. But for the most part, our crop condition has been doing pretty good. That's not the case here in 2022. We look at corn, 48% fair, 29% good, but we see 17% in that poor category. Pastures, 22% in that poor category. So we're going the wrong way right now. Looking at the graph in the lower left-hand corner, I made this from the Iowa Environmental Mesonet website they have out that way. This is looking at the percentage of corn in the good to excellent category between 2019 and 2022. 2022 is there in black, 2019 red, 2020 blue, 2021 green. Once again, the 3 previous years looking pretty good across the course of the growing season. But here in 2022, we have taken quite the dip there at the end of June and coming into early July. So looking at the numbers again, 32% is in the good to excellent category. And the past few years beforehand, we had been running above 75% for the most part of the growing season. So not the greatest conditions right now. Megan, if you can go to the next slide. I don't think I have control right now. Thank you. So taking a look at the map in the upper left-hand corner, this is a look at topsoil moisture in the percent short to very short category. Our topsoil moisture has taken a huge hit across the state of Kentucky. Yes, Eastern Kentucky has seen some replenishing rains here recently, but that's not been the case for most across central and western Kentucky. This was from the crop report on June 26th. 74% of topsoil moisture was ranked in the short to very short category here in the state of Kentucky. And that increased 40% from the previous week. So I know Megan sent out some information on her Twitter feed. This was one of the bigger jumps we've seen in Kentucky history. So we aren't alone. Indiana took a big hit that week. Ohio took a big hit that week. Tennessee, so on and so forth. So not something we want to see at any point in the growing season, especially at this point in the growing season. We also have to take into account not only how dry we've been, but evapotranspiration. So looking first at the table over here on the right-hand side, this is a look at accumulated precipitation compared to accumulated evapotranspiration for Meade County up in north central Kentucky. We look at the ET values, a combination of moisture loss according to evaporation and transpiration. You're seeing quite a few values in that 0.2, maybe even 1/4 inch range up there in the middle of June on a daily basis. So once again, this adds up pretty quickly. Now, we add this up over the course of the month going into July 6th. That's 6.8 inches worth of evapotranspiration. Again, these values were actually worse back in 2012 with less humid conditions in place, but still bad here in 2022. Precipitation-wise, looking at Meade County, they started off the month of June all right. But since then, you see they saw 0.76 of an inch on June 6th and very minor accumulations from there on out. 400s on June 7th, 200s on June 10th, 700s on June 17th, 10th of an inch on the 26th of June. Saw a decent little rainfall, 4,600s on June 30th. But once you go this long without significant rainfall, you really need some decent rains to rejuvenate the atmosphere, get crops going again, pastures going again, so on and so forth. So over that same time span, only 1.99 inches of accumulation of rainfall accumulation. You look at the difference between the two, and it's a deficit of approaching 5 inches. So your water balance is 5 inches in the wrong direction. Now, talking about timely rainfall, very important to agriculture. This is a look at the measurement station in Bowling Green down here in the lower left-hand corner. You have evapotranspiration accumulating from early June into the end of June there in blue, and you have accumulated precipitation there in green. They pretty well only had one major rainfall event in Bowling Green during the month of June, and that was on June 6/7. They saw over 3 inches at that point in time, but then you see the line absolutely level off. So I think at one point, Megan, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think you went over 22 days without rainfall down in that region. Do have some isolated activity down there this today. Will help out some, but this is a graph we don't want to see at any point during the growing season. So that's what I got, Megan. Hopefully we see a good soaking rainfall at some point here in the near future. But that's what I got right now. So I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Matt. And we actually have Chad Lee on. I noticed that he put something in the chat that said Kentucky led the nation in crop decline this past week. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on, Chad? Not to put you on the spot, but figured we had the opportunity. Okay, bad mic. That's fine. Just figured I'd give you the opportunity to say something, but yeah, Matt covered it really well. So we will go ahead and move on to the outlooks. So we have some hope of relieving the drought conditions, as Matt just mentioned. This is the 7-day precipitation forecast. Most of this is within the next few days as this disturbance moves through the area. And so we are, again, hoping that we can overcome this negative feedback cycle that we're dealing with, and that we will be able to get some rain, because as we move forward, and if we do not see rain in some of these areas, we will be looking at increasing the drought conditions in across the state. One thing that Chip mentioned to us earlier on too is the fact that far western Kentucky and Marion, that there was a dam failure earlier in the year, I think in April, and they have been utilizing lake water. And so it's not only for crops, but it's also for, you know, municipal supply that we need to have this rain. So if they do not get rain into this lake, there will be even more problems for the area. So we are hoping that this area can get rain. We are hoping that the entire state can get sufficient rain. So looking forward into the additional outlooks from the CPC. In the next 6 to 10 day period, we are looking at being probably near normal, equal chances of it being slightly above or slightly below normal. Same with precipitation. We are more than likely probably going to be below normal unless we do see this increase in this with this rainfall event. The more rain we can get now, then the more likely it is for rain to reoccur later. So again, keep your fingers crossed that we get some decent rainfall this weekend. Very similar looking map for at least the precipitation at the 8 to 14 day mark. However, you'll notice that in the temperature, it's actually showing, you know, likely chances of being below normal. So hopefully we will be able to get some relief from these really high temperatures. As Matt mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier, we have actual temperatures above 100 right now, and it is impactful across the board. Looking at the monthly outlook, we are going to again be looking at above normal temperatures as we are looking into the bigger picture. Some of that is impacted in this near term right now because this was issued June 30th, but it also is for later in the month as well. Looking at the precipitation outlook, we are probably at about equal chances, depending on exactly how the negative feedback cycle from the drought conditions sets up. If we can get some of this rainfall, we will be better off for sure. Looking at the seasonal level, so for July, August, and September, we see that there is likely chances of having above normal temperatures as well as equal chances of precipitation being at or below or above normal. But the key thing to look at here is that as long as we can get some rain, that will help temper the temperatures as well as relieve some of the drought conditions. One thing that we have talked about numerous times over basically the past year, I believe, is La Nina and its impacts here in Kentucky. Right now, we are still seeing La Nina in the Pacific Ocean. It does impact weather conditions here in Kentucky, and the forecast probability is that it will continue, and there's about a 50% chance that the La Nina conditions will continue through the end of the year. Looking at the monthly stream flow outlook, the average mean daily stream flow outlook is pretty similar to what we were seeing earlier on the stream flow of the current conditions. The same areas in central Kentucky, as well as a few areas in eastern Kentucky, are looking like they are below normal for their daily stream flow. You can also see in far western Kentucky, there's that one orange dot. I don't know if that is where the dam is located, Chip, but I know that that is an area that does need rain. Seasonal flood risk outlook. Again, we are seeing pretty widespread, below 50% chance of long range flood risk, and not a huge concern there. Significant wildland fire potential outlook. We do not have this marked in Kentucky yet. We are not above normal for expectation there. I'm not entirely sure what the threshold is where it does become a concern, where it does show up on this map, but obviously we have very dry conditions out there. I know here in Warren County, we still have a burn ban, an open burn ban, so we were not able to shoot off fireworks or anything. So while it may not show up on this map as a threshold needed for this outlook, it is something to be concerned about. So don't go shoot fireworks probably in Kentucky right now. So just a quick summary of what we've talked about. We had numerous record high temperatures as well as record low temperatures throughout June. And then as we have started July, we've also had really high heat indexes as well. There was a significant expansion of drought within the past 30 days. And if we do not see rainfall in some of the areas that have quickly worsened, we are going to see severe drought possibly appear in Kentucky. As we look at the outlooks, this suggests that there are near or lower than normal temperatures and lower than normal precipitation. So with that, we can go ahead and move into the questions and discussion section. And I will give just a minute for anyone to ask questions into the chat box, or if you feel like unmuting, you're more than welcome. Maybe another thing to ask is, since we do have a pretty good representation across the board of the ag community today, have any of you seen anything notable that you haven't already passed along, we would love to hear.
Megan, this is Kevin Jeffries from Oldham County.
Hey, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we've been pretty lucky here in at least my part of the county. We're in the southern part of Oldham County, and we've gotten some pretty substantial rains the last 2 to 3 weeks or whatever. And so, we're in pretty good shape right here. I know Shelby County, part of Shelby County, the crops, corn and soybeans, look pretty good. So, there's areas that are stressed that miss some of the rains, but we have gotten pretty lucky and got some pretty significant rains here in the southern part of Oldham County.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, that area has definitely been one of the fortunate areas across Kentucky, both that the bluegrass region and areas in eastern Kentucky have definitely seen a lot more rain than the western half. I see Chad mentioned in the chat again, he says the corn crop looks worse than the drought monitor suggests. The timing is at its worst. And I will reiterate kind of what Matt mentioned, that they look like pineapples. They totally do. As I've been driving past, they look so absurd that I didn't know what was going on with them until you started talking about the corn leaves curling. And so it really just, it's such a notable visual difference than what is normal. And it's really, really unfortunate timing that I guess, Chad, do you know if even with rainfall, do we have hopes of being able to recoup the corn crop? I know you can't unmute, but timing, yeah. Well, fingers crossed. You're pretty muffled. Sorry. Ben Rudy says, we have picked up pockets of rain, but have areas of Fulton County that have been without rain for a month or better. Also, the 40-inch soil sensor, Fulton, is offline. Yeah, we've had some of the deeper sensors that have had some issues in the longer term. So those are pretty hard to dig up. So we have left them in the ground for the time being, but thank you for passing that along. Anyone else want to talk about the impacts in their county or have a question in general?
Megan, this is Kevin again. One more question, I guess maybe for Dr. Lee or whatever, but is the groundwater in the areas that can irrigate the crops, are they, ground and surface water still adequate to where they can run some of their irrigation rigs?
He says groundwater is adequate.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on that too. A lot of the irrigation areas, especially the big center pivot areas in the state, a lot of them are located out in the purchase area or up between Henderson and Owensboro. So out in the purchase area, they're hitting a big aquifer that has plenty of water. So they really, it would take something really significant to affect them. They weren't even impacted in 2012. And over in Henderson, Owensboro area, that's pulling Ohio River aquifer water. And again, the Ohio River is still up. They would have to drop pretty low. And even then, it would take a while for that water to be depleted. So those are two of the big irrigation areas. And yeah, so they should have plenty of water. Some of your upland areas where there's not big aquifers may eventually get impacted, but and places pulling from farm ponds and streams and stuff like that, they're going to be the first affected. But since we've only been really dry for a month or so, we haven't got to that point yet.
Thank you.
Megan, this is Keenan in Franklin County.
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed on the one slide that shows the water levels. I guess on average they were, or stream flow were mostly normal. Just a comment, last week I was talking to the owners of Canoe Kentucky that offer canoeing and kayaking on the Elkhorn for the past 20 some years, and they have had to stop doing tours on the Elkhorn and switch to the Kentucky River. And he said that that's the first time in 7 years that they've had to do that.
Wow. Yeah, it's things like that that are really hard to capture whenever you're looking at discrete observations. So thank you for passing that along. All right, I'll read off what Chad just posted about the corn leaves again, and then I think we'll probably be done. So he says the rolled pineapple leaves are folded up and not capturing much sunlight. They are doing very little photosynthesis, so the crop is losing days to create sugar, losing days of growth. It is an amazing plant and can recover, especially young corn, but as we get into the tassel and silking, it cannot withstand much stress. So very, very critical time for corn. Hopefully we will be able to get a really nice soaking rain that doesn't just wash off, and we will be able to recover that. So, all right. Well, thank you for the contributions, everybody. Appreciate that. And again, reemphasizing the importance of the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter, and keeping in mind that this is incredibly crucial for whenever we are looking at what the status of drought is across the state. So with that, we can go ahead and conclude. The next regularly scheduled webinar, again, will be the first Thursday of the month, and that will be August 4th, and it will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And you can contact any of us if you have any additional questions or have feedback regarding content of the webinar. And again, if we do end up having worsening drought conditions, we will notify everybody about the opportunity for a special session webinar. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next month.